Step one in decarbonization will be biogas. And of course, there will be hydrogen, but there's a lot of hype and not so much delivered. I find it quite useful to start talking about not the demand for natural gas, not the demand for LNG, but the demand actually for methane.
Welcome to Energy Vista, a podcast on energy issues, personal and professional trajectories. I'm your host, Leslie Palti-Guzman. In each episode of this podcast, we chat with energy experts from all around the world. We exchange on timely energy issues as well on their life experience. You will learn a lot, whether you're an energy aficionado or a newbie. It's June 11, 2021, and time for a new Energy Vista episode. Today, I'm exchanging with Karen Sund, the founder of Sund Energy. She has decades of experience as a gas specialist, and she's a well-known speaker in many European energy conferences. And more recently, her focus has been on biogas. She's advising several municipalities, including Oslo, on their biogas policy. Karen joins us from Norway. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Leslie. Good to see you.
Very good to see you. Thank you for joining the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we're going to talk about a very timely topic. There are intense debates right now about the role of natural gas in a decarbonized world. And you're going to help us understand the role of biogas in this new future energy mix. So the European Union is thinking hard and working on market reforms. And in a couple of months, we'll have more indications about how they see the evolution of the gas market. So tell us a little bit about whether there is a role for biogas. And right now, my understanding is that volumes are microscopic. Obviously, it depends on the countries, but it's a very tiny share of the consumption of gas. So let's start with the basics. What's biogas?
Ooh. Biogas can be biomethane, which is then the same as natural gas in its qualities, except it's not fossil. I find it quite useful to start talking about not the demand for natural gas, not the demand for LNG, but the demand actually for methane. Mm-hmm. So if we want methane, and a country that today is importing their methane as natural gas, fossil, they see many benefits in taking their own methane emissions, converting them to biomethane, and then using them to replace natural gas. And there's two main sources. One is from landfills, which both the US and Europe is already collecting biogas from there. And the other is from anaerobic digestion, which is basically a huge tank where there is organic waste of some kind. Yeah. And when you leave it to rot with some bacteria and stuff, then there will be methane seeping up. And that methane is a mix of CO2 and methane. Mm-hmm. You can do what they call upgrading to make it pure methane or 97% methane.
Yeah. So let's take a concrete example. If I'm a farmer in France and I have a lot of waste from animals and food, what should I invest in to produce biomethane and biogas? Is it an expensive equipment? And how do I link my production of energy to the grid?
Well, expensive depends on what is the alternative. Right. This can be a way of getting income on those resources, which you otherwise wouldn't get an income on. You can make your own biogas plant, but as with all economics in gas, there's huge scale advantages. So if you have a large tank, the incremental cost is much less than if you have a small tank. And also, if you have a bit of scale, it's easier to justify liquefaction. Because as we LNG girls know, it's so much easier to transport LNG, in this case LBG, liquid biogas, than natural gas. The countries that have grids, Norway is not one of those, but many countries have gas grids. It's relatively easy to then put the upgraded methane upgraded biogas straight into the grid. And the countries are now competing to have as high as possible share in that. Denmark is already at 30% and wants to be 100% biogas by 2040. So it's going from kind of niche to mainstream.
Yeah.
And that's
so
interesting.
Help us understand how clean it is, because I know there are also some debates about, in the environmental community. So what are the pros and cons?
Well, it is methane, so you don't want to let it into the air.
Right. So in this case,
using it is better,
right,
as always, and even flaring it. But flaring is kind of a waste of resource. And then it's just like natural gas. You can't notice the difference. Not if you're using it, not if you're making it or putting it into the grid.
Yeah.
But old pipelines that leak have methane leakages, and that is bad.
Right.
So having a system that doesn't leak is good. But just going from fossil methane to clean or biomethane means it's not being counted as fossil methane. Methane is, depending on which conversion factor you use, 25 to 35 times more warming over a 100-year period. But over a 20-year period, it's 86. So if you have payability to reduce a ton of CO2, you can multiply that by a lot to justify avoidance of emissions of methane.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of advantages, it's plentiful. We have tons of waste. We remove unwanted methane, and it contributes to the circular economy.
Yeah.
Like what I hear, from the opposition, sometimes it's more like, do we need to add pipelines, or do we create more transportation if you need trucks to transport this biogas?
So the easiest thing is then for if you want to use it on big trucks as a fuel, they now take LNG.
No, I was thinking about as a way of transporting it. Yeah.
Yes, you can have pipeline, but personally, I wouldn't build many pipelines now unless it's as an integral part of a national network.
Right.
LNG works so much better and has much less risk of stranded asset as you can move it along to the next place.
I read a funny article that was mentioning that some farmers could make actually more money about using their waste and power some cryptocurrency mining facilities at their farm, rather than selling it to the grid.
I see many want to make crypto both from flaring in Africa and biogas in the UK. I don't think you'll get a different value for green crypto, but I think it can be a nice income for someone who invests in biogas. And my understanding of that farm is that some of the biogas was going to be used on the farm, and that gives you a lower cost, but it doesn't give a direct income. So if you make crypto at the same time, you get some revenue that you can pay for your investment.
Got it. So do you see a competition between hydrogen and biogas? And right now, we see a big hype about hydrogen. Why do we hear much less about biogas? It's less sexy?
Less sexy. So to say to someone, I want to take your sewage and make biogas, not so fun for the researchers. Much more topics to have fun with in hydrogen because biogas is quite mature technology. It does need some innovation, I would say, on how we organized it and how we incentivized it. And I think California has come a long way in that by giving it points for being not only a little bit better than diesel when you use it as a fuel, but sometimes 200% reduction in emissions. So you're basically getting negative emissions. And if something is going to help us all reach a net zero for the world, as the IEA is encouraging us to, and the IPCC, of course, having negative stuff helps. And in Norway, we're doing CCS, but the cost of removing more CO2 equivalents in the same region is less than 1,000 times what we have already spent on CCS without even starting to do it. So it is very cost effective and it's easy, but it's not been at the front of people's minds. And in Holland for a long time they called it hippie gas, but it's now an integral part of circular economy. It's an integral part of being sustainable. And anyone running a country in Europe today, they see less problems with geopolitics if everyone can use their own waste.
Because it's very local. It's a very local production and consumption.
You can make it local. You can, of course, export it. Like any LNG and gas.
Right.
You can send by truck or by ship. The dilemma is that it's not huge yet. So it isn't mainstream yet. So when we talk to ship owners or others who easily could blend it into their LNG that they have as a fuel, they're going, well, there's not enough for us. There's enough to blend in and start somewhere. And the more demand, of course, the more supply you'll get.
Yep.
As an old expert on this and having been a lot to African countries, clean cooking is a huge issue.
Yeah.
And if you put your cow dung or donkey dung or whatever they have to use today, or sticks, but the dung can be put into like a little tent and then a garden hose into your cooking and you have clean methane.
Yeah.
And that solves a lot of problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, the utilizations can be the same as natural gas, but maybe easier to access for some emerging markets. And so what growth prospect do you see in Europe?
Well, huge.
Yeah.
Because as solar, 15 years ago, we're going from a very small base. So some countries will double yearly. And as a nerd of global energy mix, the IEA NZE report now has 3% of the global energy mix for biogas, the exact same number, 3% for natural gas without CCS. Then there will be some with CCS, but it's interesting to see that the final use of biogas will be the same as natural gas in the world.
Yeah, very interesting. And
2050, though, out there.
Right. Recently, the European Union, released its taxonomy, and it was a big win for biogas because it's considered as a renewable gas. So, do you think that will give more incentives to policymakers, at the national level, to push for the growth of their own industry?
Of course, because to me, the taxonomy is really for the finance business. To say that you're doing green investments, which more and more pension clients and other customers want, you need to follow the taxonomy. It's not illegal to do stuff that isn't in the taxonomy, but at the moment, there's some cash which has divested from fossil, looking for new stuff. And biogas is easier to invest in, and it's definitely on the list. But the principle of the taxonomy is do no harm. And if you can be circular and sustainable, that's very good. And biogas ticks in all those boxes.
So who is behind the investments in biogas in terms of companies? Do you see big oil companies converting, into renewable and biogas? I know Total. I think Total actually invested in biogas.
Well, and Shell do it a bit, but
mostly the utilities. Like, who do you see?
The transmission company. I mean, like Snam in Italy is really gung-ho on the whole decarbonization of the grid. And step one in decarbonization will be biogas. And of course there will be hydrogen, but there's a lot of hype and not so much delivered hydrogen. And then there's this tiny little fight about should it be blue or green or any other color.
Yeah.
And what
so recently,
and what will people use? Because there's not that much demand right now.
Yeah. So recently, I published an op-ed in The Hill on the future trade of hydrogen. And one of my conclusions is that, the future of natural gas is that it will be multiform and there will be different gas coexisting. So now we talk about renewable gases, low carbon gases, hydrogen. So do you agree with that? And do you think biogas, will have this role to play to clean the grid? And more importantly, do you see it being acceptable? Because right now in the public opinion, what's going increasingly to matter is the acceptability of natural gas. And do you think biogas can help?
Absolutely. And what farmers say in Europe is that they also feel more accepted now that they're contributing to the green shift. So not only is gas accepted, and from a caution point of view, so far gas is less dangerous than hydrogen. They might get better on the hydrogen storage and explosive problems.
So for our listener, can you explain what do you see as a problem for hydrogen? It's more how flammable it is and complicated to transport in a safe way.
Yeah, and it's explosive.
Yeah.
Gas doesn't. Mm-hmm. And if it's liquid, it just falls to the ground and lies there. So there's a lot to be done on decarbonization. And if you don't use biogas and don't call it net negative, then it will take much more effort. And with hydrogen, it is a lot of effort to get large scale demand and affordable prices and safe.
So do you see some blending going on already and increasingly in the future? So how much percentage do you see of biogas being blended in the grid in Europe?
Well, let's say Europe will have 10%, 2040 roughly, because it's all well known. It's all there. And what some have been afraid of is, once we have depleted all the sources of organic waste, which includes sewage and all these, then what? And of course, we all want to reduce our waste, like food waste, preferably should be reduced. But as long as Norway's in the world lead, let's at least make energy from it. The next step will then be, all the power to something. You can have power to methane, just as easy as power to hydrogen. My concern with hydrogen is that there's a system cost in that you need to have a lot of electricity if you want the green hydrogen.
Right.
And the blue hydrogen isn't so far considered green enough. Natural gas origin with CCS isn't 100% zero energy. And you need a lot of it, and then you need to store it. And if you're using it then for backup of power, which is I think should be done by natural gas because it's easy, or gas. You lose something in the efficiency conversion there as well. Some hydrogen will be used for ammonia, for shipping. That is one suggestion. Right. But again, we've seen how long it took for the shipping industry to start using LNG large scale. And it requires new ships and new infrastructure and as you're aware, we always try to find how much will it be in year X. And I'm thinking not as much as you can get the impression of when you listen to the hype.
And so thinking ahead, in 10 years from now, 15 years from now, could there be, unintended consequences of, the growth of biogas and basically having farmers thinking thinking twice, do I produce food or do I produce biogas? Are we going to have a competition?
Well, this is good about the taxonomy, because using crops to make biogas is not considered as sustainable as using
that's
wine.
That's a good clarification.
Want to be circular and so on, and producing food to make biogas is not circular or even really sustainable.
Right. I think that's one of the missteps maybe the German government had taken, and now they stepped back from that.
Yeah. So they were too kind, basically, in their incentives, which also shows that they wanted more. And they initially, just like Denmark, initially used it for power and heat, which also isn't the best use of it. It's better when you need to burn methane to burn organic methane rather than fossil methane. So the transport sector is struggling more than the power sector when it comes to renewable.
Very good, Karen. So we have a good idea now of the role of biogas in a decarbonized system and how it could help with carbon neutrality goals. So let's move to your personal trajectory. So tell us a little bit about you. You always struck me as a very outspoken speaker in conferences. And you told me that maybe your best decision in life was the pick of your husband that had contributed also to career and your success. So tell us a little bit about it.
Well, it's certainly an advantage not to have a career husband. So we can share the work of, or we did when we had our daughter is now grown up, well, not living at home anymore, but we could share the work at home and the work of getting income. So in England, my salary was fine to live on. So I could have a good career, like many men have. I could have a career with lots of travel. So I find myself very lucky having worked in almost 50 countries for what is the best system of gas for them. And as you know, we always need to understand what is the rest of the energy system to see the role of gas, and biogas is almost in that place now. So I've spent good times in Brazil, in Jordan, in Eritrea, in Sweden, and of course working first out of Singapore and then out of London. So that teaches you a lot, and it makes you humble to the country you're visiting, not to kind of take the standard cookie cutter approach to whatever country needs more gas. Listening to what they have of opportunities and threats is very important. And when we've done that many enough times, we get wiser. And at some point, I'm thinking the few people who understand full systems, both local, national and global, almost have an obligation to say something every now and then. And many people are not outspoken. And I want people to think. I want people to learn. And I've had many clients, both countries and companies, who said, oh, why don't you just make me a strategy? I'm like, no, it has to be yours. It has to come from you. And what war do you want to go in, and how much ammunition do you have for it? How hard do you want to try? And that is the best feedback I can have afterwards, is that we had 15 consultants and you were the only one who made us think.
Very good. So you're challenging the consensus. I like that. And so you've been able to travel a lot, advise many different entities. And what else do you recommend for the new generation? I think some people are reluctant to look into fossil fuel, for sure. How do you think they should look into energy and working in the energy sector those days?
I think they need to make a choice. Do they want to be passionate? Because the more passion you put into it, the easier it is to burn. I find it easy to have been passionate about natural gas for many, many years, and now for biogas, because I really believe it is a good solution. But to get the full overview, and certainly biogas, is related to not only the energy and emission picture, but agriculture, shipping, transportation, many, many sectors, and that is demanding. And I find things that are demanding and challenging more interesting to work with.
Right.
Don't want, basic solutions.
Yeah.
So I'm finding for young people who want to enter the energy business now, think about how the values you have can be used in various parts of the industry. And it's such a big and wide industry, and hopefully work for a company that lets you develop.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Karen, for your wise words and for teaching us about biogas. We'll have you back soon, and maybe we'll compare our notes next time about the growth of the biogas market in Europe. Thank you.
Thanks for the good conversation.
Thanks.
See you, Leslie.
Bye.
Peace.
That concludes our Energy Vista podcast, which was recorded on June 11, 2021. This is Leslie Palti-Guzman saying good day and good luck.